Some movies aren't just stories, they're warnings. Every few decades, a film comes along that hits too close to reality. It exposes power, questions morality, or shows humanity's darkest corners. And that's when Hollywood gets nervous. Behind the glitz of premieres and red carpets lies another truth. Studios bury what they fear. Sometimes it's violence too raw, or politics too bold. Sometimes it's because the fiction felt a little too real. From nuclear nightmares to religious outrage, from banned reels to lost footage, these films remind us that cinema can still scare those in power, not because of monsters, but because of truth. These are the stories that vanished, the reels they didn't want you to see. So let's pull back the curtain and rediscover 10 movies Hollywood tried to hide, not because they failed, but because they dared to tell the truth.
Number 10. JFK, 1991. In 1991, Oliver Stone didn't just make a film, he started a national argument. JFK wasn't entertainment, it was provocation, a film that made America look at its own reflection and flinch. The story follows Jim Garrison, a district attorney from New Orleans who reopens the Kennedy assassination case. He's not chasing fame, he's chasing meaning. Piece by piece, he unravels a puzzle that seems to connect the CIA, the military, and every shadow in between. Each frame feels unstable, like truth trying to break through a web of lies. Stone built the movie like a fever dream, real footage bleeding into dramatization, documents blending with rumor. You're never sure what's true, and that's the point, because JFK isn't about what happened in Dallas, it's about how truth dies when too many people have something to lose. The controversy was immediate. Politicians accused Stone of rewriting history, the press called it paranoid fiction, but the public listened, and for the first time, people questioned whether the official version of events was ever meant to make sense. What makes it haunting is its philosophy. It suggests that societies don't fear lies, they fear uncertainty. We crave the comfort of a single clean story, even when it's false. JFK ripped that comfort away. It forced viewers to accept a darker possibility, that truth isn't hidden, it's buried under the stories we choose to believe. The outrage grew so loud that Congress passed the JFK Records Act, ordering classified assassination files to be released. A movie made the government confess, at least a little. Watching it now, the film feels like prophecy. Its chaos mirrors our modern world, where facts collapse under too many opinions. Stone didn't solve the mystery of who killed Kennedy, he exposed something bigger, the death of trust itself. Because sometimes, the scariest thing a movie can do isn't to reveal a secret, it's to remind us we may never know the truth. And if that one made people question their government, the next film made them question their faith. Number 9. The Last Temptation of Christ, 1988. In 1988, Martin Scorsese released a film that felt less like cinema and more like a confession. The Last Temptation of Christ didn't try to offend, it tried to understand, and that was enough to make the world furious. Adapted from Nikos Kazantzakis' controversial novel, it imagines a Jesus who bleeds, sweats, hesitates, a man trapped between flesh and divinity. He's a carpenter who builds crosses for the Romans, haunted by voices he can't ignore. He's terrified of his own mission. When he looks at the sky, he doesn't find peace, he finds doubt. Willem Dafoe plays him not as a savior, but as a human being trying to survive the unbearable weight of being chosen. There's pain in every line of his face. When he looks at Mary Magdalene, desire flickers, not lust, but longing for a normal life he'll never have. And in that fleeting moment, the film captures something sacred that no sermon ever could, the humanity of God. Scorsese shoots the story like a fever dream. The light feels ancient, the dust almost biblical. Every sound, the wind, the hammer, the breath before crucifixion, carries the echo of something real. There are no miracles here, no thunderbolts from heaven, only a man wrestling with destiny in a world that refuses to understand him. Then came the fury. Before its release, protests erupted, religious leaders denounced it as heresy, cinemas were attacked, one was even firebombed in Paris. Major chains refused to screen it, politicians demanded bans, some countries outlawed the movie entirely. Decades-long bans, as if celluloid itself were dangerous, but the film's true danger wasn't blasphemy, it was empathy. Scorsese dared to suggest that holiness and weakness could coexist, that doubt might be part of faith's architecture. For many, that was intolerable, because once you accept a flawed Christ, you have to accept a flawed humanity. What makes the movie endure is that it refuses certainty. It's not asking you to believe or reject, it's asking you to feel.
It speaks to anyone who has ever looked for meaning and found silence. It whispers that maybe salvation isn't about perfection, but about persistence. The courage to keep believing when belief hurts. Decades later, its relevance has only grown. In a world obsessed with spotless heroes and simplified morals, The Last Temptation of Christ feels radical again. It's a reminder that truth and divinity are never tidy, and that the most dangerous kind of honesty is emotional honesty. Scorsese didn't make a film against religion, he made one against denial. And that's why it was banned, because sometimes what we fear most isn't the fall of our gods, it's realizing they were human all along. But if faith could ignite riots, the next film on our list showed how fear itself could be broadcast to millions, live in primetime. Number 8, The Day After, 1983. In 1983, television showed America its own funeral. The Day After wasn't science fiction, it was prophecy. It didn't ask what would happen after a nuclear war, it forced everyone to watch it happen. Directed by Nicholas Meyer, the man behind Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, the film aired on ABC to more than 100 million people. It begins like an ordinary day in Kansas. Football games, families, dinner tables, then the sirens go off. In seconds, everything becomes ash, skies burn red, cities vanish, and silence replaces civilization. What made it terrifying wasn't the special effects, though the mushroom clouds felt all too real. It was how mundane it looked, how normal people disintegrated between one breath and the next. No heroes, no speeches, no victory, just light, dust, and absence. The US government knew the film would hit hard. Before it aired, the White House requested a private screening. President Ronald Reagan watched it alone. Later, in his diary, he wrote, "It left me greatly depressed." He would go on to sign a nuclear arms reduction treaty soon after. Art didn't just imitate life that year, it rewrote policy. But millions of viewers weren't ready. Hotlines flooded with panic calls, churches held vigils, parents couldn't sleep, schools the next morning were quiet, as if the country had collectively stared into the abyss. For one night, television had done what government could not. It made everyone afraid enough to care. And yet, The Day After wasn't designed to shock, it was designed to warn. Its power came from restraints, no music to comfort, no villains to hate, only the consequences of arrogance shown in real time. It dared to ask, if the end of the world looks this ordinary, why are we still pretending it's unthinkable? What makes the film endure is its honesty. It doesn't moralize, it observes, it doesn't predict, it reminds. Every frame says, this is what your silence builds. And in that stillness, it became one of the most important broadcasts in history, banned in parts of Europe, restricted in Eastern Bloc nations, and quietly discouraged in military networks. Today, decades later, the film feels eerily relevant again. Its landscapes of ruin could be mistaken for today's news footage. Its fear feels cyclical, like a warning humanity keeps choosing to forget. The Day After showed that horror doesn't always need monsters. Sometimes the scariest thing a screen can show is truth. And when truth becomes too heavy to bear, people call it fiction. That night, America saw the end of the world, and then went to sleep, hoping it was just a movie. But if nuclear fear could silence a nation, the next film on our list would take that silence and turn it into rage. Number 7. Natural Born Killers, 1994. By 1994, America had learned to fear the bomb. Now it was learning to worship the gun. Oliver Stone returned, this time not to question power, but to expose the circus around it. Natural Born Killers is a film about killers, yes, but not just the ones holding the weapons. It's about the audience watching them, cheering, judging, replaying. It's about us. The story follows Mickey and Mallory Knox, two lovers on a blood-soaked road trip across the American wasteland. They kill, kiss, and smile for the camera, while the media turns them into icons. Every murder becomes a headline, every atrocity becomes entertainment. In Stone's world, the television is the altar, and violence is the new religion. The film's editing is chaos incarnate, cartoons spliced with news footage, sitcom laugh tracks over mass murder. The visuals flicker between black and white, color, and hallucination, like a channel surfing fever dream. You're never sure what's real, and that's the point, neither are the people watching. Critics didn't know what to do with it. Was it satire or sickness? Audiences left the theaters shaken, angry, even disgusted. But in the months that followed, something stranger happened. Real crimes were linked to the movie. Killers claimed inspiration from Mickey and Mallory. Countries banned it.
politicians demanded censorship. It became the film that proved its own thesis, that media doesn't just reflect violence, it reproduces it. What makes Natural Born Killers unforgettable isn't its brutality, but its mirror. It forces you to see the moral collapse inside your living room. The same way people once gathered around fires to tell myths, now they gather around screens to watch blood. Stone's movies screamed that truth out loud, and Hollywood tried to cover its ears. At its core, the film asks a single question: what happens when the line between news and entertainment disappears? When tragedy becomes content? When empathy becomes impossible because the spectacle never stops? It's not about Mickey and Mallory, it's about the rest of us, applauding. Years later, it feels less like a warning and more like prophecy. The 24-hour news cycle, the viral outrage machine, the live-streamed violence. Stone saw it all coming, and he dared to ask if we'd ever stop watching. The irony is cruel. Natural Born Killers was banned for being too real, too ugly, too reflective. But it wasn't glorifying murder. It was diagnosing a society addicted to it. It ends not with justice, but with laughter. The laughter of a culture that can no longer tell the difference between fame and infamy. A love story, a massacre, a mirror. And if television could make violence look holy, the next film took that same illusion and made it feel sacred.
Number 6. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. In 1980, a small Italian film crew made what might be the most cursed movie ever shot. Its name was Cannibal Holocaust. It looked like a documentary, and that was the problem. People thought it was real. Directed by Ruggiero Deodato, the movie follows a team of journalists who travel deep into the Amazon to film savage tribes. They vanish. Later, their footage is found, showing how their arrogance turned them into monsters long before the jungle did. What begins as an expedition becomes a mirror, and it doesn't like what it sees. Deodato shot it like truth. The camera shakes, the screams don't sound staged, bodies look too real. When it premiered, audiences fainted. Police arrested the director, accusing him of making a snuff film, an actual murder on camera. He had to bring his actors to court, alive, to prove they weren't dead. That story alone would make Cannibal Holocaust infamous. But what makes it legendary is what it says about us. Because the film isn't really about cannibals. It's about civilization pretending not to be one. The filmmakers in the story burn villages, torture animals, and stage violence for ratings, then act shocked when real violence comes back for them. Deodato's message was brutal but clear. The camera is never innocent. It consumes what it points at, and when it feeds on suffering, who's the real savage? For decades, the movie was banned in more than 50 countries. Too violent, too obscene, too realistic. But beneath the gore was a moral indictment against exploitation, media hypocrisy, and the Western fantasy of superiority. It wasn't made to entertain, it was made to disgust, to confront the hunger that lives inside voyeurism. Even now, watching Cannibal Holocaust feels like crossing a moral border. It asks whether showing horror is the same as creating it, whether documenting cruelty makes you complicit, and whether truth, once filmed, can ever remain pure. It's hard to defend, and maybe it shouldn't be defended, but it's impossible to forget. Because buried under the blood and chaos is a warning that feels sharper than ever. We've turned pain into spectacle and called it news. The film ends with the last survivor staring at the camera and asking, "I wonder who the real cannibals are." 4 decades later, the question still hangs in the air. Cannibal Holocaust was banned for being too real, not because it lied, but because it told the truth too honestly. It forced humanity to look at itself without makeup, and when the mirror cracked, everyone blamed the reflection. But if this film exposed the dark appetite of media, the next one showed what happens when that hunger collides with politics, and power decides who gets to laugh. Number 5. The Interview, 2014. By 2014, Hollywood thought it had seen every kind of controversy. Then came The Interview, a comedy so absurd it nearly started a war. Directed by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, the film follows 2 American TV journalists recruited by the CIA to assassinate North Korea's supreme leader, Kim Jong-un. It's loud, ridiculous, and full of the kind of jokes that belong in midnight screenings, not international diplomacy. But the laughter didn't last long. Before the movie even hit theaters, hackers calling themselves the Guardians of Peace broke into Sony Pictures. They leaked emails, scripts, personal data, and issued a threat. Release this movie and we'll attack the theaters that show it. Suddenly, a stoner comedy became a global incident.
Major chains pulled out, the premiere was cancelled, the White House had to respond. President Obama called it an act of cyber vandalism, and the FBI blamed North Korea. For a brief, surreal moment, satire had become a national security issue. And that's the twisted brilliance of The Interview. It's not a great movie. It's a movie that revealed how fragile the world really is when mocked. Its very existence forced the most powerful nations on Earth to decide whether art could make them bleed. What makes it fascinating is the irony. The film mocks a dictator's obsession with image, and in doing so, exposes how Hollywood shares the same disease. Both depend on illusion, both crave applause, both fear humiliation. The only difference is who controls the camera. Critics debated whether it should have been released at all. Was it irresponsible, provocative, or just reckless fun taken too far? But beneath the jokes about missiles and Katy Perry lyrics lies a question that cuts deeper. Can comedy still be dangerous in an age that treats everything as content? When The Interview was finally released online, millions watched it not for humor, but for defiance. It became a digital rebellion, a movie watched out of principle. People didn't laugh because it was funny, they laughed because they were told not to. And maybe that's the point. Censorship rarely kills ideas, it just makes people curious. When power tries to silence laughter, laughter becomes a weapon. The Interview didn't expose North Korea. It exposed how much fear one joke can cause when truth hides behind comedy. In the end, the movie wasn't banned for being offensive, it was banned for being effective. It reminded the world that humor, when aimed in the right direction, can shake more than dictators. It can shake systems built on fear. And if this comedy showed how laughter can start a war, the next film on our list proved how belief itself can burn down the theater. Number 4, Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. Some films disturb you, this one damages you. In 1975, Italian director Pier Paolo Pasolini released Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom. A film so graphic, so relentless that even decades later, people whisper its name like a curse. It wasn't banned because of what it showed, it was banned because it dared to ask why people want to see it. Set during the final days of Mussolini's fascist regime, Salo turns a villa into a theatre of cruelty. 4 powerful men, a duke, a bishop, a judge, and a banker, kidnap young men and women, forcing them into unspeakable acts of humiliation and torture. But Pasolini doesn't shoot it like horror, he shoots it like ceremony. Every frame is clean, composed, calm, as if evil itself had learned manners. There's no music to guide emotion, no hero to rescue anyone, just ritualized control, repeated until the audience becomes complicit. You don't watch the film watches you. It studies your endurance, your revulsion, your curiosity, and that's the experiment Pasolini built. What happens when art stops pretending to comfort us? The backlash was immediate and violent. Italy banned it, Britain banned it, Australia banned it. In some countries, it was treated like a criminal act to even own a copy. Shortly before the film's release, Pasolini was murdered, brutally beaten and run over. Some called it coincidence, others called it retribution. Either way, Salo became a film sealed in blood. What makes it endure isn't the cruelty, but the philosophy buried inside it. Pasolini wasn't making pornography, he was dissecting power. The fascists in Salo aren't monsters because they enjoy pain, they're monsters because they've made pain rational. They've turned bodies into economics, pleasure into politics. In their world, freedom is just another illusion. The powerful allow until they get bored. That's what made the movie unbearable. It exposed how systems of control survive, not through violence, but through obedience. By the end, the audience doesn't feel shock, it feels numb. And that numbness, Pasolini suggests, is how fascism wins. Even today, Salo is banned in several countries, but its message feels more alive than ever. It reminds us that tyranny doesn't always wear uniforms. Sometimes it smiles, sometimes it sits behind desks, sometimes it's in the mirror. Watching Salo isn't about endurance, it's about recognition. Because when human cruelty becomes organized, civilized, and justified, the result isn't horror anymore, it's normality. Pasolini paid for that truth with his life, and his film remains what it always was, a mirror that refuses to blink. But if Salo revealed how power corrupts the body, the next film on our list showed how tragedy corrupts memory, and how truth itself can be too soon to face. Number 3, United 93, 2006. Some movies try to entertain, this one just asks you to breathe.
In 2006, 5 years after September 11th, British director Paul Greengrass did something no one thought possible. He made a film about the day the world ended, while the wounds were still open. United 93 wasn't a Hollywood spectacle. It had no stars, no hero's arc, no orchestral redemption. It was pure, unbearable realism. The film reconstructs the story of United Airlines Flight 93, the only hijacked plane that didn't hit its target. Ordinary passengers, strangers moments before, decide to fight back. There's no promise of victory, only the hope of preventing something worse. And Greengrass refuses to let us escape. His handheld camera moves like panic itself, unsteady, human, terrified. From the first minute, you feel the claustrophobia, the quiet before the takeover, the disbelief on the ground as air traffic controllers realize what's happening. No speeches, no melodrama, just confusion, fear, and decision. The kind of decision that defines humanity when systems fail. When it premiered, people didn't clap. They sat in silence. Critics called it too soon. Some theaters refused to screen it. Others hosted grief counselors in the lobby. Even survivors of the tragedy were torn. Some found healing, others found only pain. But that's what makes United 93 extraordinary. It's not about reliving trauma, it's about reclaiming it. Greengrass built the film like a documentary of courage, not the loud kind, but the quiet, anonymous courage of people who never planned to be remembered. They weren't soldiers or superheroes, they were passengers with cell phones, calling loved ones to say goodbye and then deciding to act. What makes it haunting is its restraint. There's no revenge, no villainous close-up, no patriotic fireworks, just humanity caught in a moment too large to understand. It reminds us that history isn't written in speeches, it's written in choices made by terrified people who refuse to give up. When the credits roll, there's no relief, only stillness. You realize you've been holding your breath for 90 minutes. That's not cinema, that's collective memory reassembled frame by frame. The controversy faded, but the film didn't. It remains one of the most honest depictions of tragedy ever put on screen. Banned in parts of the Middle East, discouraged in airline networks, too real for comfort, too raw for distance. United 93 isn't just about what happened that day. It's about what happens when we finally dare to look back. Because remembering isn't about keeping wounds open. It's about making sure they never close over lies. And if this film made the world hold its breath, the next one made it question reality itself, where fiction, fear, and control became one.
Number 2. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Before the word censorship became digital, it was physical, scissors cutting film, and few movies were sliced, banned, and feared like A Clockwork Orange. Released in 1971, Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of Anthony Burgess's novel felt like a broadcast from the future, cold, cruel, disturbingly logical. It told the story of Alex DeLarge, a teenage sociopath who leads his droogs on nights of ultraviolence and Beethoven. It's a world where chaos and art mix into one twisted symphony of control. From the very first frame, Kubrick dared the audience to stare. Alex grins into the camera, charming, dangerous, hypnotic. Then the violence begins. Not stylized, not glorified, just clinical, and Kubrick doesn't blink. He forces viewers to confront their own fascination with brutality. But halfway through, the story flips. Alex is captured by the state and becomes the subject of an experiment, the Ludovico technique, a treatment that conditions him to feel sick whenever he thinks of violence. They erase his free will. He's no longer evil, just empty. And that's the horror Kubrick wanted us to see. A world where morality is mechanical and virtue is programmed. When it was released, A Clockwork Orange caused chaos. Critics called it dangerous, censors demanded cuts, politicians accused it of inciting violence. And in England, after a series of copycat crimes, Kubrick himself pulled it from circulation. For nearly 3 decades, the film was banned in its own country, not by the government, but by its creator. What made the film so unbearable wasn't what it showed, it was what it revealed about us. It asked whether free will has any meaning if we're only free to be good. If the state can cure evil, is that salvation or slavery? Kubrick's world is spotless and sterile, yet suffocating. Every surface gleams like a laboratory, every human gesture feels rehearsed, even rebellion looks designed. The soundtrack, classical music fused with electronic distortion, turns the violence into opera. It's both horrifying and seductive, like civilization pretending it isn't cruel. Kubrick's precision traps you in contradiction, beauty that disgusts, ugliness that fascinates. It's a film that refuses comfort, even in its ending. Over 50 years later, it still feels prophetic. We now live in algorithms that reward outrage and punish disobedience, a digital Ludovico technique. We scroll, we react, we obey. Kubrick saw it coming. He understood that the future wouldn't remove violence, it would sanitize it, stream it, and call it progress. A Clockwork Orange was banned for being too real, not because it glorified evil, but because it proved morality could be engineered. It asked the most dangerous question any society can face. What's scarier, violence or control? And if this film blurred the line between freedom and obedience, the next one shattered it completely, turning conspiracy into revolution and history into heresy. Number 1. Apocalypse Now, 1979. There are war movies, and then there's Apocalypse Now. When Francis Ford Coppola made it in 1979, he wasn't just filming Vietnam, he was living it. The production itself became a war zone. Monsoons, explosions, mental breakdowns, and a lead actor who nearly died of a heart attack. It was chaos captured on celluloid, and somehow that chaos felt truer than any history book. The story follows Captain Willard, sent upriver to assassinate Colonel Kurtz, a decorated soldier gone mad. But as Willard travels deeper into the jungle, the mission turns into a descent into the human mind. The deeper he goes, the less difference there is between sanity and survival. Coppola shot it not as a battle film, but as a fever dream. Helicopters roar to Wagner, skies burn orange, villages explode to the rhythm of rock and fire. Every frame feels biblical, a nightmare staged by the gods of war themselves. And behind the camera, the nightmare was real. The set collapsed, the budget doubled, Marlon Brando showed up overweight, unread, and unpredictable. Coppola rewrote the script daily. He later said, "We were in the jungle, we had too much money, we had too much equipment, and little by little, we went insane." The insanity shows. By the time Willard reaches Kurtz, the film has stopped being about Vietnam at all. It becomes a mirror. Kurtz whispers, the horror, and it sounds less like a confession than a diagnosis of humanity itself. When it premiered, audiences didn't know how to react. Some called it genius, others called it madness. The US military refused to cooperate. Versions were re-edited, censored, and debated for decades. Even the final cut wasn't truly final. Coppola kept returning to it, unable to let it go, as if the film itself haunted him. What makes Apocalypse Now legendary is how it dismantles the idea of good war. It strips away heroism, leaving only machinery, ego, and illusion. It tells us the truth no government or studio wanted to say out loud. War doesn't corrupt men, it reveals them. More than 40 years later, it still feels dangerous, because the jungle isn't just Vietnam, it's everywhere humans build systems that devour their own souls. The darkness wasn't out there, it was inside all along. Apocalypse Now wasn't banned for blood or politics, it was... Every generation has stories the world isn't ready to hear. Some hide behind politics, some behind fear, and some disappear because they tell the truth too clearly. These films weren't banned for the violence on screen, but for the reflection they forced off it. They exposed control, faith, desire, guilt, the fragile architecture that keeps society pretending it's sane. They reminded us that censorship is never about protection, it's about preservation, of comfort, of ignorance, of power. Maybe that's why they still matter, because when we silence the art that unsettles us, we silence the part of ourselves that can change. The truth never dies, it just waits, hidden in reels, ready to be rediscovered. So, which of these forbidden films would you dare to watch first? Leave your pick below, and remember, the most dangerous movies are never the ones that lie. They're the ones that show us what's real.